My Lords, I'm delighted to follow my Right Reverend friend, the Bishop of Guildford, and I congratulate him on his excellent maiden speech. I warmly welcome him to the House and also to these benches, and I have no doubt that he'll have a significant contribution to make, drawing not only from his long-ordained ministry over a diverse range of social settings, as we've heard a little bit about already, but also from his wider life experiences. And it may well be that you've been a loss to the world of law and music, but definitely again to the world of the church, and I very much look forward to working with you here in the future. My Lords, last year I was appointed to be the Church of England's lead bishop on housing, and so I was especially pleased to see the references in Her Majesty's gracious speech to the needs of our social housing sector. And I welcome the opportunities the Social Housing Regulation Bill will provide in this session to make some valuable progress. Social housing plays an incredibly important role in providing security and stability, and this has been brought into increasingly stark relief as the cost of living rises. Measures previously set out in the government's social housing white paper to help ensure social housing is safe and of good quality and to bring about greater transparency and accountability were a step in the right direction. The removal of the serious detriment test, the removal of the cap on fines for landlords' non-compliance, the emphasis on having safety as a fundamental objective of the regulator of social housing, and the set-up of an advisory panel to amplify tenants' voices will be significant positive developments. I also want to commend the principles set out in the Together with Tenants work of the National Housing Federation. My Lords, research by the charity Shelter has found 250,000 people are homeless, stuck in temporary accommodation, and that in total 17.5 million people are living in overcrowded, dangerous, unstable or unaffordable housing. I urge Her Majesty's government to be ambitious in its response to this crisis. The strengthening of tenants' voices is welcome, but must be coupled with significant investment in new social housing. As recommended by the Archbishop of Canterbury's Commission on Housing, Church and Community in last year's report, Coming Home, for there to be adequate housing support for low-income households, there needs to be a review of how the social security system operates here. The Coming Home report, which I commend to all noble lords, describes our housing crisis as neither accidental nor inevitable. It sets out recommendations for action and change, for the Church as well as for the government, all of which it would be good to discuss with the Minister. My Lords, at the centre of these is the critical need for a long-term cross-party housing strategy to bring about more truly affordable housing and healthy communities, and to ensure that no one has to live in unacceptable housing conditions. It's essential that all key stakeholders are part of that process, including central and local government, landowners, developers, landlords, homeowners, housing associations, and faith organisations, including the Church of England. We all have a valuable part to play, and we in the Church are eager to play ours. We need more housing, but that on its own isn't enough to address the housing crisis. Good housing needs to be sustainable, safe, stable, sociable, and satisfying. Houses are not simply buildings, they're homes built to enable flourishing lives in thriving communities. As the prophet Isaiah affirms, people will abide in a peaceful habitation, in secure dwellings, and in quiet resting places. Public land should be used in such a way as to maximise long-term social, environmental, and economic value, not simply to be sold to the highest bidder. I urge Her Majesty's government to apply this lens to its housing policy. My Lords, I applaud the work taken forward across this House and the other place in previous parliamentary sessions' debates surrounding the Fire Safety Act and Building Safety Act to address the cladding crisis. I hope and trust that the government will act with urgency to remove all unsafe cladding on residential blocks. I could say much more, but let me conclude by saying two things briefly. First, that the ongoing energy crisis brings home once again the importance of improving the quality and sustainability of housing stock, including meeting decarbonisation targets for existing and for new homes. And fitting adequate insulation and heat pumps to replace gas boilers will be key here. And second, and more generally, so many of the other social problems that we encounter in this country, from poor mental health to high crime rates, from school exclusion to domestic abuse, and many more, have their roots or are exacerbated by poor housing. If we can find a way of addressing the housing crisis, we will, I believe, see the easing of pressure on the NHS, prisons, and other social services. And I look forward to working with noble lords across the House on all these matters.